Even though DC and Marvel are still really popular companies, comic books aren't the main reason why anymore. The comic book industry has been falling apart piece by piece for years, and we've seen just how salty specific comic pros have gotten. They refuse to believe that comic readers would give up on their products and start supporting other industries, but it's exactly what happened. There has been a major shift where comic readers have chosen manga instead, and I personally am one of those people, and now a very prolific comic writer is coming out and being brutally honest, talking about why he thinks people are abandoning comics and moving to manga. So we're going to start off with this Bounding into Comics article. Prolific Batman writer Chuck Dixon explains why manga is wiping the floor with American comics. So before we get into the topic at hand, if you enjoy the content that I create, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Follow me on social media like Twitter or mine so that you can see when my content is posted. And if you really enjoy the videos and the live streams that I create, please consider becoming a Dark Titan via Patreon for just $1 a month. All of the links are in the description, and of course, I really do appreciate all of the support. So it says longtime Batman scribe and co-creator of Bane, Chuck Dixon, recently explained why Japanese manga is wiping the floor with American comics. He recently uploaded his 65th episode of Ask Chuck Dixon to his YouTube channel, where Ricardo Garcia asked him, "What is your theory/thoughts on why manga is wiping the floor with American comics?" Now, I worked at a comic book store for a couple of years, and while I love a good comic book, and I always will, manga just provides, in my opinion, much better storytelling, and it's not filled to the brim with politics like American comics are. The big two in Western comics are so worried about pandering to SJWs that they're not focused on having people write genuinely good stories anymore, and I would love to see this industry thrive. I don't want to see the comic book industry fail by any means, but unfortunately, the comics coming out of Marvel and DC are just really, really trash now. It says he answered, "It's not too hard to figure out, really. There's a lot of dedication, passion, and craft in manga comics, and that's missing almost entirely from the big two. I 100% agree with this." He elaborated, "Marvel and DC still run the store here. They are still the market leaders, and unfortunately, there's no variety there. There's nothing really different, and there's not something for everybody the way there is in manga." He continued to talk about the artwork in manga. "It's not hard to see. The artwork is attractive. It's different, it's engaging, it's interesting, it's varied, so there's a lot of reason to like manga." Now, I think that he is right on the nose with so much of what he says. It continues on by saying, "And not a whole lot of reasons to like what's out now, because what's out now for the big two is, for the most part, poorly crafted. There's a few exceptions, but for the most part, it's poorly crafted, poorly conceived, there's an obvious political agenda to everything, and there's no freaking variety." I think that he is right on point here. Well, I think that diversity and inclusivity are good. These companies are hiring writers and artists who fit into diversity checkboxes and not the people who are actually good at their jobs. They're so afraid of being attacked over not hiring enough women or people of color that they're hiring people who are creating things that won't ever make them money. It's like they're more focused on diversity and inclusion and the way they look to people than actually making money, which is shocking because companies usually don't act that way. So scrolling down, it says Dixon then expanded on the variety that Japanese manga has. In Japanese manga, there's golf comics. There's not just one comic about golf, there's multiple comics about golf. And he continued, "And I've made reference on these videos to one of my favorite mangas is about fishing. It's just about fishing. It's not about vampires fishing on another planet or witches fishing or fishing after a zombie apocalypse. This is about guys fishing, surf casting and whatever, fishing from boats, fishing fishing on the shore, fishing from the banks of rivers, and the stories are fascinating and beautifully drawn and beautifully realized. He then contrasted that with American comics, but here, what do we get? We get superheroes and poorly done superheroes. There really isn't anything else at mainstream companies. It's superheroes, 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 and they are all avatars for the writers' political agendas. And they're kind of tiresome. They're not particularly well drawn and they're not particularly well realized. It's actually hilarious to read this because companies like DC and Marvel are focused on the wrong area of diversity. The reason why manga does so well, as he's explaining, is because there's story diversity. You could read about high school kids coming of age one day, and the next day you could read about sorcerers fighting the devil, and the day after that you could read about aliens invading a futuristic Japan, and then you could just read about fishing. There are so many different things in manga, and in Western comics there's been a lack of new unique stories, and it's unfortunate, but it's true. It's just 100% legitimate here. There's superheroes, 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 and political agendas everywhere. He went on, the biggest problem here is that all I see American comic book creators, the people in the mainstream, do is complain about manga. Well, why don't you learn from manga? I mean, they should. Comic book creators should look at that industry more and go, why are our readers going there? Why are they not staying with us anymore? And it's pretty easy to see the 50 reasons why. It says Dixon then offered a solution for American comics to compete. And I don't mean draw people with huge eyes and lots of speed lines. I mean do more varied stories, do more complex stories, put more effort into the artwork, put more effort into the craft, change the format for God's sakes. Stop doing little folio comics and look at what manga does. These big fat telephone books, comics released weekly, things like that. Just change the formula. Why is manga successful? Try to copy that. Do I think that the American comic book industry could be 100% saved? No, I don't think that it can be, but I do think that it could be rejuvenated in a way and just brought back, and it could be successful in its own right. But it says, of course, if they tried to copy it just like they did in the 90s here in the United States, they just get it all wrong. They don't know what they're doing, and they have no interest. They're going to complain about it, and that's going to get them no readers. I do really care about comic books in the industry, and I want it to be good, I want it to be successful, but can it be 100% revived? Can it go back to the way it once was? I personally don't really think so, but it is good to hear someone who is well known in the industry come out and say there is a problem and not ignore people's concerns that the industry's in trouble. There are so many comic pros that are so afraid to admit that the industry is failing that they just end up insulting readers, and no one wants to support their work anymore. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to give it a like, share it, and subscribe to the channel. And if you didn't, make sure to give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I will talk to you all again in the next video really soon.